demonstrates your commitment to improving the outcomes of your students. Despite the recent and projected downturns in enrollments in higher education, nationally participation in online learning continues to grow. And while in the not too distant past, online courses were something of a novelty, occurring in isolated pockets across campus, today, online or e-learning has become one of the many pillars that institutions utilize in an attempt to meet their students' needs. The numbers tell us that there is no doubt that the technology of e-learning has and continues to transform higher education enrollment. But these numbers also tell us that many times we have yet to utilize technology in such a way that we successfully transform student learning. The lower rates of retention and success that are often, though certainly not always, but are often observed in online courses challenge us to re-examine and reimagine the learning environments we create for our students. It is hoped that the information and experiences shared here today will help you in your quest to offer an engaging, effective experience for your students, that it will allow for you to add items to your inventory for later use in your journey as an online instructor, and that we may play some small role in helping to level up towards a community of practice seeking better student outcomes. Please enjoy your day. I would now like to introduce the president of Pellissippi State Community College, Dr. Anthony Weiss.
Thank you, Paul. Good morning, everybody. I hope you're doing well today. This is my first virtual conference welcome, so I hope you'll extend a little grace. One thing I did think about is that you have complete control over your meal and snack choices, so I hope you'll choose wisely as you go through the day and learn. For those of you who are not from the area, just a little bit of information about Pellissippi State. We are one of 40 colleges in the Tennessee Board of Regents, the college system of Tennessee. There are 13 community colleges and 27 technical colleges. Our system focuses on student success and workforce development. Pellissippi State itself typically has about 10 or 11,000 students enrolled in any given semester, and we're located in Knox and Blount County, just west of the Great Smoky Mountains. My own experience with distance education began pretty early in my career at Pellissippi State. I came on the faculty to teach history and helped design the United States history course probably 20 years ago. I received great help from our educational technology specialist at the time, and we had one for the institution. And as Paul mentioned, we had kind of little bits and pockets of courses scattered throughout our curricula and catalog. And I almost started every professional development session with her with this question, with this phrase: "This is probably a dumb question," but she always responded with grace and without laughter, at least in my face, about the question, and we would go on and work on the course. She's now the CIO of Pellissippi State, Audrey Williams. But here's a shout out to the folks who walk along with the faculty, the educational technology specialists, the web designers, the course designers who help provide meaningful instructional experiences for our students that are so critical. If I was going to go in and meet with Audrey face-to-face, I would walk past this large library collection we had of video courses, because that was part of our distance learning platform. And students would come in and get these little boxes of series of videos that they would take home and learn and complete assignments and get course credit. That's no longer part of our portfolio. But I think it's important to note that at the beginning of this spring 2020 semester for Pellissippi State, 31% of our courses were online courses. Like nearly every institution in the country, by the end of March, 100% of our courses were online or distance courses in some shape, form, or fashion. I think students extended a lot of grace in the spring to institutions and to faculty responding to a crisis. But this disruption is going to be with us for a while. And I believe the question is not, how do we create a new normal, but how do we create a better normal? How do we take the things that we learned through, that we're learning about technology and distance and pedagogy, to craft a better normal? And for me, that has to address two or three things. One, we have to figure out ways of addressing the gaps we have in equity. Those are things that are important to us as institutions. Prior to the start of the semester, I think they're heightened by the challenges created by this pandemic. I think this is a real opportunity to think about the ways that we provide some consistency in the learning experience for our online learners. And I think that's exciting to think about. And then I think this challenge opens up new avenues of creativity to solving problems in terms of teaching and learning and assessment, and perhaps other things as well. So I believe and I'm grateful for all the hard work that's been put in by the staff and faculty of the college to make this happen. But this one-day conference is an expression of belief in a better normal, in a better path forward, and I'm so glad that you're with us. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to Stephanie Shipley to give us some instructions on how the day is going to proceed. Stephanie?
Thank you, Dr. Wise, for your opening remarks. PSCC is truly grateful for your leadership. Also, thank you, Paul, for your guidance as our distance learning director and for leading the OLT team. And I would like to second all of Paul's acknowledgments, and I'm truly honored to work with such esteemed colleagues. So good morning to all of you. Welcome to our first annual 2020 PSCC State Virtual Distance Learning Conference. We decided to open today's virtual conference to all learning institutions and organizations, as well as publicize on social media this year. The response of presenters and participants was astounding, and we are in awe. Having moved from a face-to-face conference, we were overwhelmed with your response to participate. So as of today, we have 460 registered participants. Not sure we're quite there just yet, but we'll get there. 23 concurrent sessions and one nationally known keynote speaker. Seeing all of you, educators, trainers, higher education professors, administration, K-12 teachers, PH students, and whatever your role may be today gives us much hope for our future in education. We are now having to embrace a new way of teaching. Due to COVID and the pandemic, we've had to teach, reach, and network in an environment that we may not be as familiar, at least to all of us. So hopefully today you will leave with some new strategies, some best practices, motivation, and encouragement. In order to make today successful for you, we have a few business matters to share before Dr. Kapp presents his keynote. So I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to pull up the conference website. So I really hope everyone can see this. One thing I wanted to say is please feel free to use the chat as much as possible. And right now, if everyone wanted to put where you're from, that would be great. Like I mentioned, we have people from shore to shore. We have people presenting from New York City all the way to Los Angeles. So we are so excited for that. So go ahead and definitely utilize the chat window. So the conference website is pretty easy, and it basically at the top there are some links. The conference headquarters I have open actually all day from now till about 4:30. So if you have any questions throughout the day, then you are more than welcome to hop right in there and ask away. We have conference presenters, so if you want to get to know more about who is presenting, there's a link to that, as well as the conference staff. And if you're interested in PSCC State, we have a link to our main website. So this is divided out by the different sessions today. Our first opening session, which will begin in just a minute with Dr. Carl Kapp, is up here at the top, and clearly you made it in here, so you found the join Zoom session. For the rest of the day, for the 4 other sessions that you are able to attend, you can see that it's by the time, and you can choose, there's about 5 to 7 sessions per time period. So if you look at the title, right under the title is the Zoom session that you will need to click on, and they are different for every session. Right below the Zoom session link is a session feedback that we highly encourage you to complete. It literally should take you 2 to 3 minutes, and it's information that we will, and it's anonymous, but it's information that we will share with our presenters and information that will help us to make this better in the future. So it also notes the session audience, so that may be very helpful. So there's 10:15 to 11:15, and if you keep going down, you'll see the 11:30 to 12:30 hour. We gave you a very short lunch. I'm sorry, but I figured you could like get your lunch, eat it, and if you weren't finished, you could eat it while you were in your next session. And then at the very end of the day, after our fourth session, we have a closing keynote with Dr. Cap, and then just some closing comments and some door prizes. So if you want to be eligible for that, then you have to come back to our closing keynote. If you have any questions throughout the day, like I said, I'll be in the conference headquarters, or you can call my office phone. It is 865-539-7031, and I'll put that in the chat in just a minute. Please remember to keep your mics muted until the presenter or facilitator asks you to unmute. So we just don't need a lot of distractions. And just to give you a heads up, weather may be dicey in Knoxville today. So if for some reason you get kicked out or you're having bad weather where you are located, feel free to rejoin when you're able to. And if something comes up and you can't come to a certain session, that's okay. Come to what you can be a part of. So for all of our social media gurus out there, we do have a hashtag for today. It is hashtag PSCCDL20. And we are, our handle at Pellissippi is @PS. So lastly, enjoy your sessions. And like I said, please feel free to provide feedback, because this is, like I said, our first annual virtual conference. Next, I would like to introduce Elizabeth Ross. She is our Talent Management Director here at Pellissippi, and she will introduce Dr. Carl Kapp, our opening and closing speaker today. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Stephanie. Good morning, everybody. It's my pleasure to introduce to you Dr. Carl Kapp. Dr. Kapp is an international speaker, scholar, writer, and expert on the convergence of learning, technology, and business, with a focus on game thinking, games, and gamification for learning. He serves as a professor of instructional technology at Bloomsburg University in Bloomsburg, Pennsylvania, where he also teaches several graduate courses and serves as the director of the university's Institute for Interactive Technologies. The Institute works with businesses, nonprofits, and other organizations to help them create interactive and meaningful instruction. Dr. Kapp is an award-winning professor, author, and co-author of 8 books, including the best-selling The Gamification of Learning and Instruction and Play to Learn, as well as his newly released Micro-Learning, Short and Sweet. Dr. Kapp is currently a senior researcher on a grant sponsored by the National Institutes of Health, which involves the intelligent use of micro-learning. He has served as co-principal investigator on 2 National Science Foundation grants. Join me in welcoming our keynote, Dr. Carl Kapp.
Thank you. So happy to be here. Hi, everybody. Very excited to be at this virtual conference with so many great people involved and so many people discussing what we can do to really up the level of online instruction. So let me start today by having you help me solve the case of the disengaged learner. So let's go ahead and see what that's all about. Now, when I give this keynote, what I'd like you to do is I would like you to think about responding in 2 ways. One, hopefully you'll learn some information as we go through the presentation, so you'll take notes in that. But second, I want you to think as someone who designs online instruction, what kind of decisions did I make as somebody creating this keynote that perhaps you'd like to integrate into some of the things that you're doing. So at the end, I'm going to ask you what design decisions were made in the presentation. So let's go ahead and start the presentation. So Palisades State Virtual Distance Learning Conference presents the case of the disengaged learner. It started out like any other day. I had ventured out on my lunch break when she showed up, like a dean who had a problem that needed to be solved. Hiya, Dean. Hey, I have a problem that needs to be solved. On my lunch break, students are disengaged all over. I need to know how to fix it and why. I started to imagine the chaos, the agony, the snoring. Then the dean zoomed off into the cityscape. You've got to help. We've got to solve this mystery, and we've got to solve it fast. Help me figure out the clues before it's too late. So what I want you to do is open a browser window, or you can even use your phone or another tablet, but go to polev.com/Carl Kopp. So go ahead and type that into your browser window, polev.com/Carl Kopp. You'll get something like this. It might ask you for your name. You don't need to put your name. Just skip that. I'm not collecting any information or anything like that. So just go ahead and skip that and just type polev.com. And you're going to be eventually asked a question. But I need you to open a separate window and go ahead and do that for me. That would be awesome. And once you've done that, if you could just type in the chat, hey, I've done it, yes, and then I'll see if everybody's got that taken care of. All right, people are getting this in there. That's good. Okay, so we're going to use this as we go through our interactive mystery, and hopefully you'll be able to contribute and help us solve the mystery for your appropriate team. The poll is locked initially. We're going to unlock the polls as we go along. Excellent. Okay. I don't want everybody, cheating ahead. So, all right. So the first thing you have to do is choose your disguise, detective. So do you want to be red, blue, green, or orange? Go ahead and pick which one that you'd like to be. No pressure, but blue did win last time. So blue seems to have a lot of people might know that. So they seem to be on there. Oh, see, orange is coming up. Okay. And green is coming up as well. All right. We look like we're going there. Okay. It's got a lot of blue. Blue seems to be the most popular on this day for this for this conference. All right, so is everybody in? So if you're not able to get in for some reason, just go ahead and follow along. You can type in the chat. You can kind of take notes as we go through the presentation and see how that works. So let's go ahead and see which team wins. Now, we're playing to become, does anybody remember if you were the Iron Chef, then the original Iron Chef, and if you were the challenger and you're actually defeated the Iron Chef, do you remember what you got? Does anybody remember? I see some people shaking their heads. You actually got accolades throughout the land. So we are not playing, the stakes we're playing for could not be higher. You're playing for accolades throughout the land. So let's see which team receives the most accolades. Okay. So the stakes are high and time is short. The news of disengagement was spreading. Disengaged learners are everywhere. Students are suffering from Zoom fatigue. Green aliens from Mars land at Palisades State. Oh, there's always one newspaper that has some crazy article or something about it. We'll just ignore that. But the learners are not engaged. Why? Okay, so we need to find some clues and we need to find them fast. First stop, the student lounge. So does anybody see a clue? So if you do, just go ahead and type in what you think might be the clue. And also make sure that if you're using poll everywhere, it's polev.com/Carl Kopp. There's a couple, I saw one, polev.vom. It's actually polev.com. So many people are saying that it's the gamification book, but actually that's just obnoxious product placement. It really is the yellow sticky note. So the question that we're going to ask is, does engaging learning start with action or does it start with content? So what are your responses? Does engaging learning start with action or does it start with content? Okay, red is all in on action. Blue finally jumped in there. There's some people saying content, some people saying action. Looks more like action is the overwhelming response. Red is definitely in on action. Some comments in the notes are on action. So let's see what the right response is. Actually, it is action. We want to start online learning with action. Action helps. And let's take a look at why. Well, there's been a meta-analysis, which is a study of over 225 STEM undergraduate courses that showed active learning versus more of a lecture-based learning increased exam scores by 6%. And students in classes with traditional lecturing were 1.5 more times likely to fail. So we really need to think about how can we make learning much more actionable. That's what we need to do. That's what we need to focus on. So for example, good game designers, folks that design games for a living, know that games are engaging because they require action right away. If you've ever played a game, you don't have walls and walls of text and information. You typically jump right in. They have you do something and explain things as that goes along. So that's what you really need to think about as you think about creating action and activity. So action draws in players and can draw in learners as well. So when we think about starting with presentations, we want to start with action first. So look, I found some things written on a notebook. For learner engagement, active learning, open loops, storytelling, find Ivan. So this could be a lead, or it could be this session's learning objectives. And I will make the PowerPoint available on SlideShare so you can have that. What is active learning? We need to find Ivan. Ivan the informant. I knew one of his old haunts. He was about as friendly as a clown with no rubber nose. Hello, Clueless. Look, I'm going to ask you a question about engagement. Let's see if you know the answer. You discovered in the student lounge that active learning is effective, but what do students themselves think about active learning? Okay, let's go ahead. So when faculty use active learning technologies, do students feel like they've learned more, less, or about the same? So red looks like they're abstaining from this particular, there they go, okay. 81% people say students feel that they learn more during active learning. Green, 95% in. There's some dissension on each team. Some people are saying, we think students think it's about the same. And every team except green for some reason says it's less. So green's not thinking it's less. Green is thinking, no, it's got to be more. When faculty use active learning technologies, students feel they learn more. Well, green, ouch, but no. Actually, researchers found that students in active learning classrooms, they do learn more, but they feel like they learn less. And in fact, one of the researchers actually said that the feeling of learning and actual learning is actually uncorrelated, anti-correlated, which means when the more you feel like you learn, actually sometimes the less you're actually learning. And this is a result, they think, in part due to the increased cognitive effort required during active learning. So students feel that if they have a really good lecturer and presents really good information and it's kind of entertaining and they like it, that they're learning a whole lot. But in reality, when learners work to struggle through the content, when there's a little bit of effort there, when they can't get the answer right away, they're actually learning more and able to recall more in the long term. So when we get feedback from the students, not only students, but us, all of us, are not really good at determining whether or not we learned. And this is a process called desirable difficulty. There's a gentleman named Robert Bork and his wife have come up with this concept meaning desirable difficulty, which is really kind of interesting. Is that when active learners are learning and involved, manipulating items and content and information and struggling a little bit, they're actually learning a lot more than if they just sit back and listen to a lecture. The concept of desirable difficulty says that this is really interesting. The easier it is for you to learn something, the harder it is for you to recall it later on. So think of it yourself. If you've learned something really easily and gotten it, you don't put a lot of effort behind it and you've got it. But if you have to struggle with the content and work through the content and figure out all about the content, then it's easier to recall later on because you have more neural pathways to that content because you struggled. And actually, there's some research in the field of mathematics that show that people actually build neural pathways more when they struggle or make a mistake with a mathematical answer than if they get it right away. So if you get it right away, you've got it. But if you struggle a little bit, you're able to feel that and later on provide that kind of content or information. So desirable difficulty is something that we want. And the really interesting thing, they say this, and I think this is fascinating because all of my instructors and teachers would always say to me, Carl, set up a place in your dorm room or your home when I was in high school that's quiet, that you only study in that place and you're focused and you're concentrated. And that's really good for short-term performance, like on quizzes and tests. But long-term memory, what we want is to be learning in a place where there's lots of things happening, lots of actions happening, and we really have to focus on that information so that then we can retain it and provide it long-term. So I think that's really kind of interesting. So check out the concept of desirable difficulty. So Ivan had a question for me. I was the one who was supposed to be asking questions. Should learning be easy or challenging for best long-term results? So let's go ahead and see that answer. We should have pretty much unanimous answer, I think. Should learning be easy or challenging? Okay, let's see how we do this. Green said maybe easy. So, orange has a dissenting vote as well. Very interesting. Let's see what, give everybody a chance to, red and blue though are all in. Very interesting. No, blue, there's somebody dissenting. And red says, no, it needs to be challenging. So actually, things that are too easy or too difficult don't pique a learner's interest. So they lead to boredom or frustration. So we actually want things to be a little bit challenging, but we don't want them to be too challenging. If it's too challenging, students drop out. So let's take a look at this. Let me show you my folder on the topic. And there's a gentleman named Mikhail Csikszentmihalyi, who came up with this concept called flow. And flow is the optimal state of learning. So we'd love to have students in the optimal flow of learning when they're going through information. And basically what happens is when things become really difficult, we get lots of anxiety. If things are really easy, we get bored, and flow is right in the middle. The issue is flow is not a straight line as shown here. It's more of a zigzag, because if something's difficult and then you get it and you understand it, then it becomes easy and easy. If something's tough and you finally understand it, it changes. So flow actually, no pun intended, ebbs and flows as you go through your content. So we want to try to maintain the optimal state of flow. Now, a good example of flow, I always give this example of this. So what is flow? What is this state of mind of flow? If you've played sports, you've often had this feeling of flow. A good example I like to give is when my older son was graduating from high school, my wife decided to make him a scrapbook. And it wasn't for him, it was for her. She literally sat down at 8 o'clock in the morning to create this scrapbook. And literally by 10 o'clock at night, she got up and said, "Hey, I'm hungry. It's time for dinner." She had literally been so engrossed in what she was doing. And it was challenging, but not overly challenging for her. And literally at 10 o'clock, she's like, "Hey, Carl, what's for dinner?" And I'm like, "Dinner? It's 10 o'clock at night." She goes, "It can't be 10 o'clock at night. It's not 10 o'clock. There's no way. I literally just sat down." And I'm like, "Okay, fine. Here's dinner." She ate dinner, calmed down, goes, "Oh my gosh, it's like 11 o'clock at night. Why didn't you tell me?" So that's flow, right? You get so absorbed in something that you can't, that you lose all track of time. Now, I'm not saying that all instruction is going to be put us in a state of flow. That's probably not going to happen, that all of our learners all the time are in state of flow. But there are some things that we can do to help encourage this state of flow. So I know a little about flow. Here's what contributes to the state of putting a learner into flow. But before I do that, does anybody have a concept or an idea of how learners get in the state of flow? Just go ahead and put that in the chat if you've got some ideas about how we can put learners into a state of flow. Give you a moment to go ahead and do that. Personally relevant, okay, good. Chance to be creative, absolutely. Tying it to personal interests. Let the students build on what they already know. Make it fun for them. Scaffolding is a good technique. Consistency, schedule breaks for movement. Yep. Enough of a challenge to push them. We want to pique their curiosity. We want some diversity in content. We want it to be relevant and hands-on. Yeah, these are some really good answers. And this is what we want to accomplish as we think about putting learners into flow. Gradual challenges getting more and more difficult. Yep. Zone of proximal domain. So what we want to do is think about things like achievable tasks. So if we give the learner a task that they don't think they can achieve, they'll drop out. Right? Maybe not physically, but mentally they'll be like, I don't think I can do this. So we want to make the tasks achievable. And somebody said about scaffolding and kind of building on what they already know and taking simple and make it a little bit more difficult. So we absolutely want to do that. We want to make it an achievable task. We don't want to make it too boring though, because if it's boring, people are like, I already know this, or I got it, etc. You want to help the students have a place where they can concentrate on what they're learning. Concentration is a big part of the learning process. So we want to do that. And what we can do is we can kind of prime students for this. We can tell them that you're able to go ahead and concentrate on that particular item and look at that item and give them a surrounding of how they can concentrate it. Clear goals. So clear goals are something that we want to have the students achieve and strive toward. So you want to make sure that when you present the information to the students, you want it to be very clear. You want them to have that information. So that's what you want to do. And Scott, I'm sorry that you're having trouble logging on there. I did have it on the EV as a slide, so I'm sorry that you're disappointed, but maybe if you could log on and maybe catch up. Control over your actions, autonomy. So one of the things that we know that learners really like and really helps them learn is to give them control over their actions. And it doesn't have to be exact control, right? So, you know, again, when my kids were younger, I used to say to them, you know, you can go to bed at 8 or 8:30, right? So there's a sense of autonomy and a sense of control, but they don't always have that control or that autonomy. So we kind of set that up, and that will help them achieve the element of flow. So these are some 4 things that we can think about if we wanted to create an experience of flow. So you can also add other elements as well. So for example, you can add something like novelty, something that students aren't used to, haven't experienced before, something that they can think about and say, oh yes, okay, that's new, oh, that's interesting, and give them that type of experience. You can also surprise the learners. And you can do this with content, right? You can give them information that maybe they think they know the answer, or you ask them a question and they're like, oh, I didn't realize that was the answer, or oh, I didn't realize that was the information. So you can give them the sense of surprise and something new from that perspective. You can also use inconsistency. So you can provide a pattern and then show them how the pattern maybe is broken, or the pattern's different than what they expect, or ask them to predict the pattern as they go on or go through. And another thing is complexity. Now, a lot of times in instructional environments, we want to try to avoid complexity. We don't want to have a really complex situation. But if you think about, for example, video games, or you think about games that learners play, oftentimes there's a lot of complexity going on, and the players just kind of jump into the complexity, move with the complexity, and try to figure out how the complexity works. So by providing some level of complexity, you can do that. And we know from the research that adult learners learn best when they know they don't know something, right? So they may get confused, or they may, but what that does is it creates this awareness that they need certain knowledge. So sometimes what you can do is present a complex situation, ask the learners to try to figure out the complex situation or solve the complex situation or something like that. And then once they know they can't solve it, go ahead and provide them some really good information. Say, oh, it's complex, you're confused. You should be confused. Now, let me give you that information, because they're most open to learning that information. So I think that can be really kind of helpful. And then finally, incomplete information. So they don't have the big picture. One of the things that you can do is you can provide them with the ability or the opportunity to predict the future. So you can give them some information, ask them, what do you think is going to happen next? What do you think should be the next step? And that can help them with that incomplete information. So that's something that you'd want to think about as well, is how that incomplete information could impact someone and make a difference. So all of these things are ways that we can help to put the learner into flow and help engage them in the content and concepts of what's happening. And as I said, lastly, an unpredictable future, right? We can't predict it, but we're going to ask them to predict it. When we ask them to predict it, there's some things that they could think about. So, wow, detective, you aren't as dumb as you look. But you know how to create active, but do you know how to create active online learning? How? I can't possibly tell you that. Go talk to the learning lady. Oh, okay, it's time for Twitter mission. Okay, so you've been listening to this for a while and you've been doing stuff, so go ahead and now's your time. You can tweet the hashtag for the conference. You can tweet at me. You can tweet at Pellissippi State, or you could call your mother. Go ahead, I'll give you a moment to do that. And if you didn't have a chance to get into Poll Everywhere, here's your chance. I'll put it into the chat, and you can log in and kind of get caught up. So you pick any team that you want. So we'll take a moment here during Twitter mission. Well, if you don't tweet, Mandy, simply give us a message, write an email, call your mother, those kind of things. All right, so I think everybody's had time to send a quick 140-character message, so let's go ahead and keep going. So let's go visit the mysterious learning lady. So it was a late afternoon when I arrived at the learning lady's. Yeah, I'm sorry about that, Mandy. My dad's in heaven too, and my father-in-law just arrived. So it's been a rough few weeks, but I totally understand that. Thanks, Kate. So it was late afternoon, and I arrived at the learning lady's lair. Suddenly, a voice appeared out of nowhere, the mysterious learning lady. I saw her eyes in the shadow of the alley, and she simply said, "There are many things you can do to promote active online learning." Really? Active online learning? I'd love to see that. There's a lot you can do. I'll show you. Wait a moment. Then suddenly, she emerged from the shadows. I pictured you a little differently. Look, it's as simple as making the learner do something. For example, identify a procedure. So one of the interactive online things that I often do is I'll give students a text-based description of a model. Maybe it's the instructional design process. Maybe it's the design thinking process. Maybe it's the process of evaporation, condensation, and rain. I give them the text-based version of that. Then I break them off into groups and ask them to create a diagram depicting the system or process that I just discussed. So this is a way that you can have learners manipulate ideas and concepts, put them into small groups where they're discussing the model, and put the model into PowerPoint or Prezi or whatever type of tool that they have. But it's kind of like, you know, we can't have virtually, we might not have physical manipulatives, but it gives them a chance to manipulate things on the screen, to use their cognitive processes to create those models and those elements that we might want to do. Oh, I got a little message there. So that's something that you might want to think about. So identifying kind of a procedure or process. You could also have them solve a mystery, as we're talking about here, or even go on a scavenger hunt as they try to find clues for, maybe it's a historical lesson, maybe it's a lesson about what chemicals work well in certain situations, what combinations work well. You can do that. Simply answering a question. In fact, it shows, research again shows that using quiz questions can be a really powerful technique. And one of the things that I do is after every class, 2 days later, I give a quiz. And I use, we use Desire to Learn for our tool there, but I give a quiz to the learners. And I didn't really anticipate this development, but one of my colleagues said, do you give a quiz to your learners after class? And I'm like, yeah. And she goes, well, why do you do it after class? They're like, well, I want to make sure, you know, they're kind of reinforcing the knowledge later on. She goes, well, one of the students said they pay more attention to your discussions in class because they don't want to go back and do the quiz. So they want to make sure that they get the quiz right. So something as simple as having a quiz can be really a powerful tool for a level of engagement and interactive. Have them solve a problem. Problem-based learning is a great thing to do, and provide learners with a vague but solvable problem and have them attempt to solve that particular problem, or even specific problems, starting off class with a problem or a series of problems, especially if you're in math or one of those. Confront a challenge. So a lot of people say to me sometimes, hey, Carl, this is great. I teach like sociology or psychology or other courses. You know, what kind of problems or what kind of, you know, situations can I do? And oftentimes you could consider starting the instruction with a case study. You could have a case of a certain situation, or you could have a case of something happening, and then have the learners confront that challenge. You know, what would you do? Or what's the next step? Or why do you think she said that? Or why do you think he took that action? And then you can take that information and you can help confront that particular challenge. You can have the learners go through that. You can even, we've done this oftentimes where we confront the challenge at the start of class virtually, then put them into Zoom breakout rooms, then have them come up with the best solution based on how the group of folks in Zoom did it, and then come back and report out to the class. So again, that gives them a chance to take a look at the information, to confront the information, and kind of go through that information. Or just make a decision. What would you do in this case? And then you can talk about it and discuss it. And finally, things like writing a proposal or a business case or a marketing plan or a lab report or a study document. So all these things can help learners really focus and concentrate on doing action first, active learning. Audience response systems are active learning. Speeches are active learning. Absolutely. Thanks, Chris. So lots of, and I'm sure there's other active learning. Does anybody have other active learning things that you do in class, virtually or even physically? Yep, helping each other. Think, pair, share is a good way. Yeah, we also do, I don't know if anybody's ever heard of the earthquake exercise. So that's used with whiteboards. So you take the whiteboard and the whiteboard software and you draw some lines, a 5x5 grid, and each space in the grid is numbered. And you ask students to pick a number like A1. And 3 of those squares are the earthquake squares. And if you get the earthquake square, you lose points. If you answer the question right, you gain points. So that's some pretty good stuff. Yeah, sending students into a community, that's an awesome idea. Any kinesthetic exercises, journaling. Someone asked about what is a gallery walk. So if the person that mentioned that might want to put in a little text on that. We've all got a bunch of really smart people here sharing knowledge and information. So feel free to share that. Also, I will share the slides on SlideShare. So you'll have a copy of the slides as well. Yeah, Google works really well. Google Jamboard, if you've ever used that, you can use the squares on there. And I have exercises where people kind of have to put them in the right order or form clusters in kind of affinity analysis. Kahoot is a great tool. It's a great audience response system. There's tons of great audience response systems. Kahoot, Umo is one. Poll Everywhere is one, lots of different systems that you can use. Yeah, so great ways to kind of engage learning and contribute an idea. Just even something as contributing an idea is a way to go there. Thanks, Stephanie, for the description of the gallery walk. Very helpful there. Awesome. Okay, here are some matches which may contain your next clue. The Storybook Lounge, featuring a bunch of characters, a plot, and a setting. I arrived at the Storybook Lounge as shady as a black cat hiding under a beach umbrella on a cloudy day. I had the feeling I knew this neighborhood. It was home of the Kingpin. So we meet again, detective. Have a seat. Before you speak, answer me this. Do learners retain facts better when presented as a bulleted list or in the form of a story? Okay. Bulleted list or form of a story? Oh, okay. Blues in there with a little bit of a bulleted. Oh, everybody putting in a little bit of a bulleted list. Story still in the majority. Green's got the majority going there. All right, so let's see what the right answer might be. Yeah, there are some, Ray. So contrary, there's always. I never have 100% of any answer, which I find fascinating. Actually, research indicates that learners retain facts better when they're in the context of a story. So why is that? Well, story provides context and elaboration of memory. Oftentimes, bulleted lists don't have the right context. So a story adds more neural path. This is what the researchers think. A story adds more neural pathways to that content or that information. It's kind of like if you remember that old memorization trick where if you have a shopping list, you're supposed to think of a room that you know really, really well and place the things around the room. And then mentally, milk goes on the sofa and bread goes on the chair, and then mentally walk around the room and kind of, a mind palace, kind of pick up that information. Well, it turns out stories create that kind of information. And that information then can be retained. And actually, some researchers were doing some work with MRIs, which was some fascinating work. And they found that when learners read about a certain activity in the story in the MRI, the part of their brain that was related to that lit up. So it was almost as if the story was kind of a practice for what the brain was going to do. And if you think about, Harvard for years and years did Harvard case studies, right? They were trying to give the novice learners experience by setting up these case studies and giving them this list of case studies. Yeah, absolutely. Case studies are very rich in story content. So case studies, stories are a good way to help people retain information. We know from research that learners, that experts, one of the things that they do when they're confronted with a new problem is they look through their stories, their past experience, and try to see which one most closely fits this current situation, while novice learners try to solve the situation right away because they don't have that library, if you will, of stories. So one of the things that you can provide to learners is a library of stories that they can refer to if they have a problem or if they have an issue or any of those kind of things. So stories can be really powerful tools for helping that to happen. That's good intel. We've got to go talk to the dean. Whew, all this running, I need to get into some kind of shape here. Okay, let's brief the dean on what we learned. Well, okay, for some reason, the dean didn't seem bothered by the fact that she was breaking the school's no smoking policy. Interesting. Okay, so what do we have? This is where you come in. So what have you learned so far in this presentation that we can tell the dean? What do we know about active learning that we can tell the dean? So go ahead and type that into the chat there. Okay, use a storyline. Give achievable tasks. We remember stories. Lots of action, encourage flow, clear goals. Oops, with the C maybe. Scaffolding. Make it challenging. Choose an engagement, avoid bullets, solve mysteries. Okay, whoops. Make it challenging. Okay, good. These are all really good things that we want to think about and that we want to incorporate into the learning process. Yeah, don't stress too much that students don't feel like they're learning. Absolutely. So far, so good. Follow the next clue on the matchbook I found in my desk drawer. Open loop cafe never closed. Open loop cafe, what do we have here? A note. During class, should we present learning objectives as open or closed loops? Open or closed loops? So most people say open. Blue, I thought you were going to be 100% in. Yes. Okay. Orange is pretty the most divided there, although red, 25% is into closed loops. So let's take a look at closed or open loops. So what is a open or closed loop? Well, basically, it's a thought process. So for example, most learning objectives are, you will learn 3 things about the history of New York. That's a closed loop. There's, okay, 3 things, got it. An open loop is more of a question. What 3 things about New York make it different from other cities? Closed, open loop. So a closed loop means everything's done, wrapped up, nice, neat, tightly. Open loop means it's open and it's ambiguous. A really good example is Law and Order. So if you've ever watched Law and Order, and let's say if you've ever been in a situation, it's 11 o'clock at night, you have a 7 o'clock presentation the next morning, you're flicking through the channels and you come to Law and Order. And now you can't go to sleep because you've got to find out does that sleazeball go to jail? That's an open loop, right? You want to know the answers as humans. So for example, a good example of this is if you take 2 dots and a curved line, we make that smiley faces, even though it's 2 dots and a curved line, because we want to close the loop. We want to add meaning to something. We don't like unresolved issues. So we stay up and watch that Law and Order, even though it turns out to be a repeat. Okay, yeah, right. No, it never is. So we want to go ahead and create open loops for the students. And so question, yeah, selecting their own projects, doing their own information, because there's not a set answer. It's not a closure until they're all done with it. TV shows do this all the time. If you've ever watched that, there was a science show on a number of years ago that at every ending was like a cliffhanger. It was called, Breaking Bad. So in Breaking Bad, at the end of every show, you had to watch the next episode. You had to know what was going on because that was an open loop. You wanted to find out what's going on. So you wanted to find open loops. Another really good example of open loop is if you've ever watched, anybody ever watched the show House Hunters? Yeah, Marvel movies do it. House Hunters does it all the time. So they take House Hunters, for those of you who aren't familiar with it, they take a couple who have no business being even in the same room, let alone in a relationship, and they have them look for houses, right? So the one person goes, I want to live in the country where it's quiet and no traffic. And the other person says, I want to live in the city where there's lots of noise and somebody upstairs is a member of a band, right? So they have these two, and then they show them 3 houses, and none is compatible with the other house. They're all kind of different. And they all, I don't know where, like, they're like, what do you do for a living? Well, I collect and recycle newspapers. Oh, and what do you do for a living? Oh, I cut grass by scissors. Okay, what's your house budget? Oh, it's $2 million, right? So I don't know where they get these people for that when they talk about it. But yeah, they have no idea what budget means. So, but the beauty, and at the end of the show, you're screaming at them, you picked the wrong house. What were you doing? But if you think about it, it's really kind of a brilliant use of open loops. So they give 2 people, so there's a little bit of conflict there. They have 3 houses. None of them fits what they're going to want to do or how it works. And then they engage you as the audience in what is the right choice. So when you think about these open loops and creating these choices and things like this, using those kind of techniques, give 3 scenarios and no scenario quite fits, right? Oftentimes, in subject. Now, it depends on your subject. Some subjects, there's a very clear answer and it's always this or always that. Other subjects, there can be some more wiggle room, some interpretation. So giving the people those interpretations can be really helpful. It helps you see where mistakes are. It creates this open loop, gets you engaged in the outcome. So think of Law and Order and open loops to help you get that information. Create those open loops. And in video games, they do that all the time, where they keep, even when they finish a loop, they add another loop. So that can be really kind of helpful for thinking about that. Final piece of the mystery reveal, just in time for the end of the presentation. I was anxious to get some rest. But to my surprise, as the dean was driving away, she threw yet another matchbook. Plagues and Games, The Strange Relationship. Unfortunately, we'll have to leave that mystery for this afternoon. Have a great conference. Good job, detectives. Okay, so that's the end of the presentation. So what I'd like to do now is kind of do the debrief a little bit, right? So those are some credits. Now for the takeaway challenge. So remember, at the beginning of the keynote, I asked you to think about this from a learning perspective. Maybe learn some new information about engaging learning. But then I wanted you to think about it from a design perspective. So what kind of design decisions were made in this story? And we're going to use, Ron, a numbered list instead of a bulleted list. So it's slightly different, I guess. But let's go ahead and think of that, right? Okay, so the use of color animations, animations, mystery to solve, the noir theme, familiar items, recall familiar items. How about, we'll say that. Oh, theme, excuse me, recall items, decisions, intrigue, cultural relevance. I don't think I typed that correctly. Yeah, so easy interactions, allusions, references to pop culture. Right, so we did a number of different things to kind of help solve the mystery. And it does keep moving, and engagement of the different participants. So I wanted to use game elements and game design techniques to create the presentation. So let's take a look at some of what was in there. So first, story and characters. So the story starts out as a detective noir story, and we have different characters. We have the dean, we have the detective, we meet Ivan the informant, we meet the mysterious learning lady, so the kingpin. So we meet a number of people as we go through the story to kind of move forward. Then we use polling or audience input. So the polling was about getting interaction, but it wasn't just polling. So for example, if you don't have polling software, you could use polling within Zoom, but you could also just use the interactive chat as we did here and providing those kinds of information. Humor, maybe that's debatable, but we use mystery and curiosity. So one of the things that draws in learners' attention, we know, is to create a sense of mystery or a sense of curiosity about how things can unfold and how things happen. So using mystery and curiosity is a really good way to draw in learners. We also used a form of blending the story and the instruction. So the idea is I presented a little bit of information, and then we embedded it into the story, and then a little bit more information, and then the story. So rather than giving you a bunch of facts and figures as, you know, here's how many learners learn this, here's how many learners do that. The other thing, we added a little bit of a surprise, hopefully, and some things. We have some teams and some winners, and we have this concept of an open loop. So those are some elements that we explored. So I want to kind of dive deeper into this so that you can go and kind of do this on your own. So I want to show you a couple of things as we go through the process. Whoa, I did not mean to do that. Okay, but I did want to do this. So just show you a couple of things that I think might be helpful. So the whole presentation, except for the polling, was done in PowerPoint. So a lot of people ask me, was there special software to do that? No, there's not special software. It's just PowerPoint and the polling software. Now, one of the things that I think makes sense in a lot of presentations is to ask learners or students to think about them on different levels. So when you do a presentation, you might say, hey, we're going to talk to you today about, you know, chemical formulas or mathematical formulas, things like that. But I also want you to think about, how do you present those formulas so they make sense to someone, or how do you present the solving of that formula, as I'm going to show you today, so that it makes sense, so that you can share that with someone else and you show all your steps. So asking learners to be engaged on multiple levels kind of has them thinking cognitively, both on what you're saying, but also on kind of the process and the presentation of how that works. So that's one thing to think about as well. The other thing to think about as we go through the story is, you know, notice I've got this detective character, and he is presenting the information. And we use lots of different images of that detective. Now, I got that detective, a lot of people ask me about the artwork. I got it from a student of mine who drew the artwork for me. So if you've got an art department at your college, if you've got colleagues who are good with art, you can have them draw up the images so that you have those images and so that you can use those. So you don't have to, invest in clip art or anything like that. You can go ahead and use what's already there. One mistake I made in this presentation, I guess I wasn't clear enough about, should be pull EV as in Victor instead of B as in Bob. So maybe when you present, keep your slides up a little bit longer so people can read the name, but I usually try to do that so that people can see that, but obviously made a mistake. The NATO alphabet would be perfect. Give learners choices. So in the presentation, I presented which team that you'd want to be on. So it really doesn't matter how many teams you use or the fact that you have teams, but teams add a little bit of that competitiveness. So I've done this without teams, just having people answer questions, and found that it's not quite as engaging as if people become a part of a team. And becoming part of a team really kind of makes it a little bit different. And as Melody pointed out, it's a blend of individual and group work. Also, one of the things, we will find out, Marilyn. Also, one of the things that I did here with the image is I don't have to have an image for every single scene. A lot of scenes, I just use the gray background. So once you set the theme or whatever you'd want to do, you could go ahead and set that as well. And here, for example, is just cut from the scene and use that in the element. And then here we talk about action, but then we add the content that needs to be there, that information that I think makes sense from a learning perspective. And I kept it black and white so I could add images. So for example, I brought this image in from just PowerPoint on the search, and it was a colored image, and I just used the tone to make it black and white. So we're able to do that to keep in the theme. So that's part of the reason why I use the black and white theme, so I could bring everything or pull everything together, which makes sense. And then here is the image, and here's another image of my detective. And literally, I just grabbed my detective, I cropped my detective, and then I can make them bigger or smaller. So the advantage of that is you can get different looks from the detective or from your artwork. It doesn't always have to be the same look as you go through that process. The Twitter mission, I threw that in for a couple reasons. One thing is, I know that learners online for a while tend to get bored, tend to wander, etc. We can never stop them from using Twitter. They're at home at their phone, etc. But we can give them a chance to do that. Because having a chance means, okay, they're going to do that, and then hopefully they'll come back to what we're doing. So it gives them a chance to do that, to think about that information, and to go from that particular process. Here I did use a little bit of, the brown color, and I did use a little green here. You can kind of see that. Also, one important thing that we did partway through the presentation was that this is a chance for reflection. So I honestly believe there's no learning without reflection. There's just experience. So one of the things that you can do with learners is ask them at certain situations in the course of your teaching to reflect upon what you've been teaching them. And if this is a larger class, I might actually have groups go together. Sometimes I'll do this game kind of like Boggle. So I'll say, okay, I want you to individually write down, what you got out of this presentation so far. And then I have them compare it to another learner and cross out the ones that are the same. And so the ones that are left are the ones that each one had differently. And that's another way to go over and to recall that information. And then I add that information, and I kind of made a big contrast with this particular slide, and then try to use a lot of what I talked about there. So I wanted to talk about how else you can use this. So a lot of people might say, well, Carl, that's great, but you know what? I don't like that. I wouldn't use that for my own presentation, or I don't think that story is really appropriate for me, that kind of stuff. Yeah, a quiz definitely can be. So here's another way to think about using this. So here's the CDC's 10 steps for conducting a field investigation. And you could go through the steps and repeat and go over those steps. But what you could also do is you could make these into a story. So for example, you're working for the CDC, you're stationed in northern Pennsylvania, there's been a sudden increase in the flu, now you need to investigate. So now maybe this is more practical based on the content you teach, maybe you don't teach detectiveness, those kind of things, so you have that. You have to choose an investigative team to join. So now you join an investigative team to go through that process. And now your boss gives you a choice on how do you want to start the investigation? Do you want to talk to the local health administrator or go visit a doctor who's been seeing a lot of cases? So you can see how you can take the same concept or idea and make it much more practical, much more specific to the content that you provide. And Melanie, I do believe informal quizzes are really powerful, good tools to refresh. Sometimes I just call them knowledge checks. So that's how I differentiate between a quiz, which is for a grade, and a knowledge check, just to help the users check their knowledge. In fact, there's some research that about spaced retrieval, which basically says if we space out the retrieval of knowledge, people will retain it and recall it more than if we kind of do a data dump on them all at once. So doing these informal quizzes or knowledge checks can help reinforce that knowledge. So a quiz is actually a methodology of learning. So I think it's kind of interesting. Yeah, Cahoots is a great way to do that. Cahoots is a great tool. The right thing for you to do is to go visit the doctor. You need firsthand knowledge, of what is happening. And so, doctor, can you tell me about, this mysterious flu? And then, yes, but we have to discuss it in my office. Now you have the questions in terms of what's happening. So you can see how this could be used in a subject other than a mystery and solving the mystery and that kind of stuff. And then here we have to explain the symptoms, and maybe the doctor doesn't know about the National Hypothesis Generating Questionnaire. So now this is an opportunity for instruction, right? The doctor doesn't know. Here's some more instruction about that particular item using bullet points. So, but this gives us a chance where we can provide that information to the learner in the context of the story. So I'd like to ask you to reflect for a moment. Is there any kind of content that you teach that you think you could turn in to an interactive story? And I'll let you go ahead and answer that while I bring up the final score to see which team gets accolades throughout the lane. Accolades throughout the lane. Before I do that, though, this is a tool called Vyond. It's one of those cartoon type of tools, but you could use that to create characters. Even if you can't get the artwork, you can use some of that to create those characters. Let me go ahead now and bring up poll everywhere. We'll find the winners. So I use a tool called Poll Everywhere. Again, you could use Umu or whatever. There's lots of tools out there that do that. And then what I use is a process called segmentation. So when you run a report, you segment that report, and the segment allows you to, so if you'll notice that I had you answer what team you're on, based on what team you're on, that then does every other answer. So that's how I did that process. Whoops. I have to spell correctly or else it just does not work. Okay, the moment of truth, drum roll, please. We're generating the report. The red team, accolades throughout the land. Congratulations to the red team. 73% correct. So you won, yay. Now the great thing about this is it's anonymous. So you could be on any team that you like. And let me just go back to the presentation here. One more thing to add as we go through the process. If you want to use Poll Everywhere, I'm able to use it, so you can go ahead and kind of, if you want, check it out for 90 days. You can go ahead and do that for free. The free account, I think, only has like 10, but automatically upgrades, and you can use that as well. So a couple, so I want to, Stephanie, I think I have a few moments to answer questions. I hope so. I tried to leave some time.
You do. You have about 11 minutes.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So how did everyone know which team they were on? So good question. At the beginning of the selection process, you got to choose which team that you were on. So you selected at the beginning what team that you wanted to be on. You may you may have forgotten, but you had the opportunity to check that and see what team. And also, when you answer, you can kind of see. So students could be assigned to teams to see more of which students might be grasping content. You could do that. So Melody asked about assigning. So what I did here is I anonymously have you choose whatever team you want to, and then you can be on whatever team that you would like. But you are able, with Poll Everywhere and lots of polling, there's Turning Point, there's lots. But what you can do with that is you can actually assign student numbers. And so you can even do quizzing with the numbers, or you could assign teams yourselves and have students be on those teams. So that's a possibility that you could do as well. If you don't, so let's say that you don't have Vyond, and there are other, like Vyond's not free, but there's others like Vyond. I think Toonly, there's one called Animaze, I think. Type in free explainer software, and that might help you. But the characters that I use, the detective, the background, all of those characters were made by a student of mine. And I asked her, and she allowed me to use those figures wherever I'd like. So, and she got credits for using them and that kind of stuff. In fact, it was, I think her name was on the credits. So, Kristen. This is the screen. Oh, there we go. Oh, Vanessa did those. Okay, Kristen did other ones. So you can ask. I would recommend asking students if they would be interested in creating artwork for your class or your interactive story or whatever that you would like to do. That can be helpful to them, and do that as well. So yeah, Jamie, I think there are. So one is Umu, one is Kahoot, one is Poll Everywhere. There's one called Turning Point. So all those are different poll software that can be used as well. Yeah, Kahoot is a lot. I mean, it's a lot of fun. Kahoot's very game-like. So it has a lot of like fun things and things like that. Yeah, and if you know of others, please post them. Yeah, absolutely. Always pay students for work. Absolutely. Yep. Darla, do you mean accessibility in terms of like 508 compliance, or do you mean accessibility in terms of technology? So let me give you, so in terms of screen reader and technology, one of the things that I find with these interactive stories is that I use, I write them up as a story in paragraphs. So if a student has a screen reader, they won't get exactly the same accessibility experience as others, but it does provide the content and the information that you're teaching them. So that can be helpful. A good way to do that, just write it up as a almost like a case, but because you have because you have actors, they can say, oh, detective speaks. Oh, okay, learning lady speaks. Okay, Ivan speaks. Okay, and kind of get the unfolding in that way from that perspective. Visually, what I've done is try to done versions where I put like all the content that I say on the screen, so it's more slides, but it has the content if it's more of a visual helping people see it visually who might not be able to hear as well. The other thing that you can do is okay, 25 people for that. In terms of accessibility, Poll Everywhere will work on your phone. So if you have Zoom and Poll Everywhere, you can do that. The issue is trying to scroll back between Poll Everywhere, Zoom, etc. But you don't need a very heavy internet connection to use Poll Everywhere or Turning Point or anything of those. So that is some things that you can think about. Other questions? For asynchronous, actually, you can take something like Storyline or Adobe Captivate or Adapt or even Lectora, and you can put these into there and have buttons that click like a branching story. There's another one called Branch Track, which is kind of nice. You can check that out as well. Yeah, Stephanie, great comment. Yeah, you can definitely use it. So yeah, it does. And Donald, I'll put that as well. It's you have to have developer. Oh, I can show you real quick. Do I have some time? Yeah. So if you have in PowerPoint, let me go to that slide. Yeah, here. Now, there's a couple really kind of interesting things like that. Oh, I don't design transitions. This is actually Visual Basic, and you can actually go and set properties for a Visual Basic form and put the form into what you're typing. And I'll, Stephanie, do you want me to send you a copy of the slides, or?
That would be great. I have everyone's email.
Okay.
Yeah, and if we can hold, like, not hop out just quite yet, we have Dr. Flora Tidings here, and she is our TBR chancellor, and she's about to jump in. So I'd like for her to meet you and for her to give a quick welcome. And so I'm sorry if you were talking about or were answering other questions and I just interrupted, but
no, that's quite all right.
Didn't want anyone to leave just yet. But on that note, also we do want to thank you so much for your opening keynote. And if anyone knows how to give little reactions at the bottom, you can you can give them a little clap, or you can give them a shout out in the chat. But that was very engaging and very interactive, and I cannot wait till your closing keynote. Here's Dr. Tidings.
Thanks.
Let's go ahead and get her on here. Hi, Dr. Tidings, can you hear us? If you want to turn on your webcam and your microphone, we would like to welcome you and just thank you for popping in. And would like to introduce you to our keynote, Dr. Cap.
Stephanie, Dr. Cap may need to stop sharing.
Oh, yep.
Oh, I don't want to interrupt. Y'all, I was just going to jump in.
We're just excited to see you and just wanted to say good morning and thank you for jumping in. And Dr. Cap just had a phenomenal keynote, and Dr. Cap, say hi. But Dr. Tidings, if you want to give a few words and just thank you, kind of tell what you do for TBR schools.
Oh, well, thank you very much, Stephanie. And it is my honor to be the chancellor of the TBR system. And I get to work with all of you, the wonderful people that make everything happen. And I'm really excited about this virtual summit that y'all have put together, and that's why I just wanted to kind of pop in and see what was going on. It sounded like an incredible opportunity. Dr. Cap, thank you for being the keynote speaker and the work that you're doing with the group today to help us learn more about these amazing activities. So we're very appreciative. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. My
Yes.
pleasure.
We've had a great morning and we have a great day of sessions left. So we have a break until 10:15. So Dr. Tidings, if you want to go back to that website where you access the keynote, if you want to jump in on any of the sessions, that would be great. And then we also at 3:30 Eastern time have a closing keynote with Dr. Cap. So I know you're very busy, but we would love for you to join us anytime today.
Thank you so much. Thank y'all for allowing me to lean in.
Of course. All right. Thank you, Dr. Cap, so much. I don't have any announcements except for that I will be in the conference headquarters all day if you need me. And if you have just any random questions, comments, concerns, feedback, whatever it is. But remember how to get to those Zoom sessions, and don't forget to complete the session evaluations. That's really important for presenters and for us as a conference. So does anyone, Pellissippi, have any comments or anything that you all need to share? Dr. Cap or any of the PSCC people, any announcements?
Nope.
Okay. Well, thank you all so much, and we will see you around today. We are going to end this meeting, and if you came in and were wanting to join, I believe it's this session, board games and Zoom, how to make roll and write board games. It's actually going to be in this room, but we have to close this room. So you're going to be kicked out, and then you'll just have to rejoin. All right. See you guys later.